Hello guys, welcome to another video. Today we are going to see the French Revolution. So, let's just get this started.
So I said to the Marquis de la Fufayette, "What do you think I am? Some dirty peasant? I've never worked a day in my life." Wow, that Marie Antoinette sure is pretty. Sure is. Wouldn't want to be Prince Louis though. That's going to be a lot of responsibility when he becomes king, especially since France is in financial ruin. Quite. Thank you one and all for attending the royal marriage of my grandson, the future king of France, to the Archduchess of Austria.
Oh wait.
Now for
Is that like an emu? Or is that like supposed to be... I have no idea what that is.
the very awkward yet historically accurate part of the ceremony, where we all watch them get into bed together.
Yay, we're watching people get in bed. Now this is a tradition that goes way back far, like a long time ago, right? There's even this weird story read where he wanted to test to see if the guy was like a wolf or not. I have no clue what this was. It was some weird fairy tale. So the father watched the woman and the man get in bed or something like that. So apparently, there was a guy who was dressed up as a dog and no one noticed. I'm so confused by that fairy tale. You can check it out. I have no clue. Like, I don't remember anything from it other than that stuff.
All right, now that's out of the way, let's leave the royal couple to it. You better give us an heir, you fat, ill-bred boy. Nighty-night. That's gonna be a lot of responsibility. France is in
Financial ruin.
You fat, ill-bred boy. Quite. That's gonna be a lot of responsibility. France is in financial ruin. Fat.
You fat, ill-bred boy.
That's gonna be a lot of responsibility. Oh, great. He's a freaking weirdo.
Oh, and by the way, he looks like that emo kid from the Emo Wars. Wait a minute. If it was an emu, then he's the emo kid. Oh, yeah, that's a cool Easter egg.
France, the most prosperous, cultured, and beautiful nation in the world, as it had been for centuries. An exquisite social culture with the...
Personally, I don't really like France that much. I know. Personally, I'm more Prussian, pro-Prussian. I don't like this stinky French, but I am French, so I'll give them credit.
The king and the upper classes throwing crazy parties every night, enjoying high living and fine dining. Who cares that they were only able to do so off the backs of the hard-working, starving poor?
Knowing 98% of the population, what could possibly go wrong? Everything.
What are they gonna do? Revolt? They're only 80% of the population.
Oh, 80%. Well, that's still a huge amount.
Life in France is great. What's that, France? You want to go to war with Britain and increase your power? Go for it, little buddy. You do you. And you lost. Now you're in severe...
Oh my, that's so much land. Like, look at look at this.
You do you. And
look how much land the French lost.
And you lost.
Oh my, look how much. That is enormous. Think about all that land.
Now
Territorial loss. They had all this stuff and they lost it. And remember, even when we're talking about before Succession War, France had like all this land in their control, right? And remember, that all that stuff, they had such an enormous amount of land, all lost. I feel so bad for France. They lost that much land.
Now you're in severe financial debt. We have no money. What do? Should we stop partying? Heck no. Party harder. That's okay. The peasantry will pick up the slack. They were created by God to do all the work, and you were created to reap all the benefits and party hard. That's just how society works, and we've all just accepted it for centuries. Why? Why what? Why do the nobility get to be all rich and stuff? Just because they were born into it? And the rest of us schmucks just have to accept that? Hell, why do we even need a king? Who decided that? It all just seems very unfair and unequal, and I, for one, am starting to question it. Wow, that's very enlightened of you. And so began the Age of Enlightenment. Great philosophical thinkers across France and beyond began to question whether this beautiful nation was really all that beautiful after all. Hey, Prince Louis, bad news. Your grandpop died of smallpox this morning, which means good news, you're now the king. So just to sum up, France is in severe financial debt, and the angry populace are beginning to question how necessary you are.
Ew, we need monarchy.
But hey, I believe in you, champ. You got this. Maybe. Oh no!
Oh, no.
Prince Louis Capet became King Louis XVI in May 1774. He was a notoriously weak man, and he knew it.
He's a soy boy beta.
He barely had the wisdom to rule a nation, never mind one in crime.
Alright, so the French economy. We're rich, party time. We're losing money, still party time. We have no money, party to forget. Heads are gonna roll. LOL, JK, keep partying. Well, they weren't all partying. There was a lot of people that tried to fix up the economy. The problem was I think like they were just behind. They were behind in everything. They didn't know how to catch up, and they were just stuck in the past. That's why I think gave them a big failure.
Crisis, and he was easily manipulated by those around him.
So give us a raise, right? I think it's because he was just a weak leader, right? And he constantly neglected the stuff that would make the people better. You don't need a democracy to make things better for the people. That's such a flawed idea. You just need a good leader. You can't really say that democracy is always a perfect system. Nothing is. How did we get into this conversation? If you want to know more about that stuff, go check out my 50-minute video about Lavater. Can you help pronounce the name?
Around him. One of his first acts was to try to get revenge on the British by financing their American colony's revolution. Hey, we're an independent nation now. That was real swell of you, Louis. Couldn't have done it without you. Glad I could help. So hey, about all that money we lent you, when can we get that back? Yep, you're a great guy.
Oh yeah, thank you so much. You're so amazing, but we have to get going now.
I'll never forget what you've done for us. Real glad I could help, friend, but about that money, gotta go now, chum. Best of luck to you.
You know what I would have done if I got scammed like that? Team up with the British and the Spanish, right? I would team with them all up together. We gang up on these Americans and take them out.
Oh, no.
Yeah, you really failed that big.
And now France was in even more debt. France's poor, suffering under the strain of economic ruin, watched as the nobility continued to live as though nothing was...
Yeah, so how I notice it is that there was a lot of envy coming from the people. Envy can lead to many things. Just because they're doing all that stuff, as awful as it is, how they neglect the people. This doesn't excuse chopping off heads and, going to the other extreme.
Wrong. In particular, they grew increasingly disdainful of the Queen, Marie Antoinette.
And she was also Austrian, which means she was German, which means, oh boy, they probably hate me too.
As she continued to spend all of France's money on her own luxurious lifestyle and fashion, while the peasants were breaking their backs in the fields, she was walking around like, hey, my hair is about. I'm not making that up. Her hair really was like, hey.
That would have been so hard to animate.
Ending earned her the nickname Madame Deficit. And
Madame Deficit. Do you know what deficit means? If you don't know what that is, it's kind of like, imagine the government, they spend more money than they make, right? That deficit for the year would be, what they spent more on than making. That's basically a deficit. For example, we have $2 trillion in deficit every single year. Well, it's like maybe more like 1.5, but it's basically 2 trillion.
And speaking of the Queen, there was also a long-standing scandal around the fact that the king took a very long time to boink her. And
wait, I gotta search this up. Okay, so after some research, I couldn't find anything. But man, it's like a debated thing.
the working classes of Paris began ridiculing the royal couple with lewd pamphlets depicting the Queen as a court thought. Wuss, unable to fulfill his marital duty. Respect for the monarchy was at an all-time low, as France's fine...
So, here we go. Love and respect feature Killer Mike. Respect. A little respect. Show some respect.
Monarchy was at an all-time low, as France's finances were spiraling out of control, and the king and his aides really only had one solution to the crisis. Tax the poor. Tax the poor. We could do a sexy calendar shoot. Tax the poor. And so it was. The poor, who were already struggling to make ends meet, found themselves being taxed from every direction. Hey, I'm the royal tax collector. Looks like you've yet to pay your income tax, head tax. By the way, how many windows you got in that house of yours? 3? Oof, yep, there's gonna be a tax for that. Hey, your local priest here, have you paid your church tithe yet? Well, at least this one is going to the good work of God. Sure. God. I think this year, God wants me to buy a new swimming pool. Hey, private tax collector here. Oh, and I brought some goons with me. Just a few quick questions. How much salt did you buy this year? About 7 kilos, I think? Yep. Okay, there's gonna be a tax for that. Oh, what's that over there? That's extra salt I held over from last year, so I wouldn't have to buy as much this year. Oh, yeah, there's a tax for that. And what are you doing with all of this salt? Well, obviously cooking. Mm-hmm. On the table. Yep. And preserving fish and meat. Oh
No, there's gonna be a tax for that.
no. Yep, there's a tax for that. Hey, how old is he? He's 9. And so he's purchased his required amount of salt for this year, right? What? No, he's 9. Uh-oh, sorry, little Timmy.
I feel like back then they would have some level of independency since, they're all farmers and they kind of have to survive. They need the children to be able to be, pretty smart, know some stuff. But yeah, he's 9.
Looks like I'm gonna have to tax you for that. Yep, salty. There's gonna be a tax for that. And that's not all. A huge portion of the peasants' harvest had to be given up. And there was also the labor tax, where peasants were required to work a certain number of days for their local lord without pay. Obviously, people weren't too happy with these taxation policies, and the aggressive nature of these private tax farmers sometimes even escalated to violence.
Bro, the one rule you should never break: don't get the citizens riled up. You never do that. They're like producing the entire economy, bro. Y'all idiots.
In particular, though, the people really hated how inconsistent the taxation rules were across the nation, and also the fact that the first 2 estates often had to pay very little, if any, tax at all. And so, the anger continued to grow. France had a population that was just about ready to explode. What could push them over the edge? How about a touch of natural disaster? A series of harsh summers and winters left the peasants' harvests in ruin, meaning they had no food or money, and the cost of bread skyrocketed. Of course, the upper classes had massive stocks of grain and wheat, so they were virtually untouched by the...
Wait, why is the king of Prussia on there? Isn't that like Frederick the Great? I'm confused. He's Prussian. I guess these French people hate France so much that they like Prussians.
This new crisis. But now the poor really were starving, and they began to riot. Women took to the streets. Bakeries were raided, and bakers suspected of keeping bread for themselves were sometimes even hanged. Wow, this is really getting out of control. Your Majesty, we need some decisive action. You need to step up and lead us. What will you do? Okay, I've got this. I know. I'll summon the Estates General, and they'll decide what to do. You really are a fat, ill-bred boy. The Estates General was the closest thing France had to a government, apart from the king. It was a purely advisory body and was rarely summoned. In fact, it hadn't been summoned for 175 years prior to this. But with France in a severe crisis, the king felt the time was right to call on the government to help. The Estates General was made up of representatives from the 3 estates, that is, the clergy, the nobility, and everybody else. Okay, thanks for coming, everyone. The first order of business is regarding the clergy and nobility. You all get brand new Porsches. You get a Porsche. And you get a Porsche.
No, you need a Bugatti.
And you get a Porsche. Everybody gets a Porsche. And now into the second order of business. France is completely out of money. Like, it's never been this bad before. Anyone got any ideas? How about we all get Lamborghinis next time? The king decided that in order to make a decision, they had to come up with a voting system. Okay, the clergy. You have a population of 130,000, so you'll get 1 vote. The nobility. You have a population of 350,000, so you'll also get 1 vote. And the third estate. You have a population of 27 million people and make up 98% of the population.
Okay, so 27 million versus those, little ones. Also, wait, didn't he say the other one was 80%? How did it get from 80 to 98? I think he just got some numbers wrong. But based off that, yeah, that's an ginormous population. There's no way, seriously, there's no way that you thought this would make sense, that this would all actually connect. The best system I could have thought of for France is, so one is the whole nobility, clergy, right, and the king, and then the second one, right, is all the people. So like the constitutional monarchy. If they would have stuck with that and would have made it an actually good government, they wouldn't have gone through the French Revolution. They're all idiots. The people are the idiots because they just like chopped down all the heads, right? And they were very illogical. But the clergy and the nobility were idiots too because what like seriously, what did they think was gonna happen? They didn't think ahead. And the king's an idiot because bro, he's a coward. He's weak. He's weak.
Very impressive. You'll get 1 vote. The Third Estate were obviously pretty unhappy with this system because they kept on finding that this would happen. We propose to raise taxes on the Third Estate. All in favor? All opposed? 2-1. Taxes will be raised on the Third Estate. We propose a motion that says the first 2 estates are a bunch of poo-poo heads. All in favor? All opposed? 2-1. It's official. We are not poo-poo heads. The Third Estate realized that any attempt at reform would be outvoted by the 2 upper estates, and they thought that was kind of lame. So they decided that since they were 98% of the population, they could go off to form their own government, make their own laws, and take over the running of the country. And so, the National Assembly was born. The Third Estate was now in control, and there was nothing the king could do to stop. Ha! I've locked you all out of your building. What are you going to do about it? We'll probably go find a different building that isn't locked. Oh, no! The National Assembly did find another unlocked building, just down the road, an indoor tennis court, where on the 20th of June 1789, they all took the tennis court oath, pledging to continue meeting until the king finally gave in to their demands for more equality and economic reform. This new National Assembly included many of the most educated members of the Third Estate, including 2 young lawyers by the names of Maximilien Robespierre and Georges Danton. Some members of the first 2 estates even joined their cause. Some of these men formed a radical new political party called the Jacobin Club and quickly became leading figures. While many members of the Third Estate simply wanted more equality, a growing number in this Jacobin faction would begin calling...
Alright, so we got no girls allowed. The Jacobin Club, it's rad to be radical. I love Rob Speamed, hee, and then Jacobin's rules. Oh, Jacobin. Okay, so... Or no, Jacobin's rule. So yeah, I get the whole design, right? It's meant for them to be a little radical. Except with this, this is just a normal thing everyone should have.
For something even crazier, the removal of the king entirely. And this is where fear began to take hold. With such a volatile situation developing, everyone was afraid of something. The king feared his position was under threat, and he called in the military to take position around Paris. The Third Estate heard rumor of the gathering military force, and they feared the king was planning to round them up and arrest them. Maybe he'd even execute them. It also didn't help that the king had just dismissed France's popular finance minister, who had been trying to make reforms himself.
Idiot. When you take out the people who, actually are trying to make things better, you kind of see that's not gonna get better. Oh my, the French Revolution and the whole setup, it's just all a big mess. Everyone's stupid here. And you'll see my point once the citizens start to take over. Well, not even the citizens. The citizens never win. We just get all these other people that are trying to represent the citizens, and then they start chopping all their heads off.
It seemed the king was done negotiating. Fear, left unchecked, often boils over into anger, and anger detonates with violence. The angry people of Paris, after centuries of cruel inequality, harsh oppression, even starvation, fearful of having their new movement for reform demolished so soon, decided that it was now or never to take action. Screw reform. They decided they'd do one better. How about revolution? The people of Paris, believing the French military was preparing to attack, decided they should arm themselves. The National Assembly announced the creation of a bourgeois militia, the National Guard, and immediately, many troops from the French military defected over to the revolutionary side. In the early hours of July 14th, 1789, a large crowd stormed and raided the Hôtel des Invalides, a military hospital where they were able to secure a large number of rifles. The bad news was they weren't able to find any gunpowder for their new weapons. The good news was they knew exactly where to get some. A prison fortress and a symbol of royal tyranny towering over Paris, the Bastille. Mid-morning, the crowd gathered around the Bastille and demanded that the man in charge, Governor Delaunay, surrender the prison and hand over the gunpowder. Obviously, Governor Delaunay was like, no way, so he stalled for time by inviting
Bro, you look so old.
a few members of the crowd in for negotiations. The crowd, still waiting outside, quickly became impatient, and before long, they stormed the fortress, taking on the French troops inside. Your Majesty, we've received word that the people have surrounded the Bastille. Governor Delaunay will hold them off. No need to worry. Actually, Your Majesty, it appears the crowd is now headed away from the Bastille. You see? What did I tell you? Clearly, Governor Delaunay has defeated them and has them on the run. No need to worry. Your Majesty, isn't that Governor Delaunay's head on a pike? Well, clearly, Governor Delaunay has taken on the form of a bodiless pike-head deity, and the people are so enamored with him, they're parading him around the city. No need to worry at all. When the National Assembly heard about the violence that had taken place, they had two options. Either one, they denounce it and try to carry on the revolution using peaceful means, or two, they say, damn, you stuck his head on a pike? That's pretty hardcore. And we love it. Incidentally, they went with option number 2.
So, yeah, they went all violent, and no one went against this idea of violence, and they would start just killing everybody, right? And chopping their heads off with the Bastille. Not the Bastille. They started chopping off heads with the guillotine. And it just gets all dangerous, and to the point where it's just way too extreme. It's way too extreme, and things go way too far. This honestly feels like if we ever had a rise of conservatism in America again, what I notice will probably be 2 options. One, it's going to be violent, and they're just going to get back for, revenge or something like that. They're going to be armed and ready. Or 2, it's going to be kind of like a Christian rise, right? They're going to kind of come in more peacefully and try and be a little bit better with negotiations. Either way, they both still kind of agree with the ideology, they just have different approaches to how it should be.
Some historians believe this reaction paved the way for the utter violence and bloodshed that would become the legacy of the French Revolution. This widespread acceptance of violence during the Revolution is also largely credited to the writings of a certain Jean-Paul Marat, a man of science with a horrible skin condition that kept him confined to a bathtub. He began writing a radical newspaper he affectionately named The Friend of the People. Citizens of France, be very afraid. Given the chance, the king and the nobility won't hesitate to massacre us all. The solution is simple. Execute them. Kill every last one of them. Cut off 1,000 heads, and if that's not enough, cut off 1,000 more. Oh, hey, Mr. Squeaky. What are you doing down there? You're so cute. Aw, I love you too, Mr. Squeaky. Mwah. Now, where was I? Oh, yeah. Kill them all. It became one of the most popular publications in Paris during the Revolution and succeeded in spreading ever-increasing fear and anger among the people. In August, leaders of the National Assembly, with help from a certain Thomas Jefferson, adopted the Declaration of the Rights of Man and of the Citizen, an incredible document that guaranteed liberty and equal rights.
When you have the violence, the radicals take over, right? That's when you know everything just goes wrong. Once the radicals take over. Almost every single time, I can guarantee you 99% of the time, the radicals always, go too far. As that's kind of their whole point. They're radical, and it just comes off as a failure. And they do violent stuff.
Rights to all men. And when I say men, I mean men. Despite its glaring shortcomings in gender equality, the massively influential declaration would go on to inspire the struggle for liberty and equality across the planet for centuries. However, back in France, the vast majority of the people weren't really so concerned with enlightened ideas of equality as much as they were concerned with the fact that they were still starving. Bread was still expensive as hell and hard to come by. The people felt that one reason nothing had been done yet about the crisis was because the king simply couldn't see the problem. He lived in Versailles, a full 20 kilometers southwest of Paris, and as a result, lived in comfort, separated from his dirty, stinking subjects. On October 5th, a crowd of women, 7,000 strong, decided they'd do something unprecedented. They decided they'd remove that separation and confront the king directly. The women marched all the way to the king's palace in Versailles. Along the way, the crowd continued to grow into the tens of thousands, and when they arrived, they demanded an audience with the king. What are those things outside the palace? They're poor people, Your Majesty. That's poor people? They say they're hungry. Hungry? Then let them eat cake. Wow. See,
So yeah, that is a famous line. I don't know the origin of that, but I find it very interesting, right, by how she acts. Or like that quote she says. It kinda goes to show she doesn't really understand, right? These people don't really understand how normal people work. When you're so isolated, no matter what, even if you don't have money, if you're just isolated from society, you're gonna get lost, and yeah, that just leads to big problems around you, right? You're no one's gonna like you when you do like all this stuff, right? Sometimes they'll just feel bad, but most of the time when you're leaving yourself out, right, of everyone else, when you stay away from being social, that does have very large negative effects.
See, this is the exact BS that led to this whole mess in the first place. You're so out of touch. They're writhing around in the filth, breaking their back to barely scrape by, and they come to you demanding just the basic ability to feed themselves, and you think a slice of cake will sort them out? Well, then let them eat Taco Bell Crunchwrap Supreme. Wow. They're not that desperate.
By the way, I think cake might make it worse because cake is delicious, right? And then that'll make them want to eat more cake and they'll be angry and even more envious that they have cake. That's even worse. Just give them, like, bread. At least one effort to make yourself look like you don't have much. If you, just show off your money, of course you're gonna get people angry. Common sense.
Members of the crowd actually managed to break into the palace with the intention of killing the queen, who narrowly escaped through a secret passage in her bedroom. The enraged mob killed several members of the royal guard and raised their heads on pikes, which, if you haven't noticed yet, is something they were quite fond of doing. The king had no choice but to come out and talk to the crowd. He agreed to accept his new position, sharing power with the revolutionary government, and to return to Paris with the crowd, removing the separation between king and subject. King Louis had a problem with people constantly raiding his palace.
Okay, so that's kind of the end of the video. Thank you so much for watching, and yeah, I'll be done now. We'll watch part 2 another time, but see you later.